Some dreams are nothing more than fleeting fragments of everyday life, but others open a door to the future. In 1999, an unknown illustrator in Japan published a strange little manga that quietly chronicled 15 prophetic dreams she had once seen. And one by one, those dreams began to come true. But the most terrifying part is that the final dream has not happened yet. According to the book, it is foretold to take place at exactly 5 a.m. on July 5th, 2025. So what was in that dream, and why has it haunted readers for over 2 decades? Let's uncover the mystery in today's video. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's story. But first, if you like and subscribe before this video ends, they say your luck might just change. On July 1st, 1999, in Japan, a strange comic book was published. It carried a title that was simple, yet filled with quiet implication: The Future I Saw. At the time, almost no one paid it any attention. There was no reason to. It wasn't visually impressive, it wasn't created by any prominent artist, and it had received no promotion through any media channel. In fact, even if someone had happened to pick it up and flip through it, all they would have seen were a series of unusual dreams, captured in pencil sketches and accompanied by a few brief notes scribbled in the margins. It looked like nothing more than a graphic journal, a dream diary brought to life with rough drawings, sometimes chaotic, sometimes obscure, and sometimes so cryptic that the meaning was nearly impossible to grasp. And yet, more than a decade later, on March 11, 2011, Japan was shaken to its core by a catastrophic earthquake and tsunami that devastated the northeastern region of the country. Over 15,000 people were killed, tens of thousands were reported missing, and the world watched in stunned silence as images emerged of a high-tech nation swallowed by the sea. In those days of confusion and fear, a surprising discovery surfaced, sending a shockwave across Japanese online communities. Someone remembered that long-forgotten comic book, and what they found would leave the public stunned. Because 12 years earlier, in one of the dreams recorded in pencil, the artist had depicted a scene that seemed to mirror, almost exactly, the events of March 11th. Seawater flooding the streets, tsunami waves crashing inland, and strange numbers like 311 appearing on the book's cover, as if to warn of something no one had yet understood at the time it was released. The coincidence was too great, too detailed to ignore. Thousands of people began to track down the comic. They turned every page, examined every sketch, every note in the margins, as if trying to follow a code sent from the future. And soon, they uncovered something even harder to believe. Within that book were a total of 15 prophetic dreams, and according to the reader's own tally, 12 and a half of them had already come true. When The Future I Saw unexpectedly became the center of public attention following the 2011 disaster, the first question the Japanese public wanted answered was this: who was the person behind it? And yet, as all eyes turned to the creator of the work, what they received in return was merely a brief, ambiguous name: Tatsuki. A pen name that came with no verifiable information. No one knew who she was. Even the publisher's address no longer retained any contact records for the person who had created the book. In a world where nearly all information can be traced with ease, the fact that a person could remain completely hidden for more than 2 decades made everything feel even more mysterious. As Tatsuki's name spread like a phenomenon, countless fake accounts began to appear across social media. Imposters claimed to be the real author, released new so-called prophetic dreams, and pushed public opinion into a state of chaos. Some believed this was a premeditated hoax. Others suspected that Tatsuki was not an individual at all, but an organization, or worse, a product engineered by hidden forces deliberately manipulating public belief. Then, in October of 2023, just as the fever surrounding the prophecies in the manga began to surge once more, Tatsuki suddenly returned. And she did so in this way: by re-releasing the original book, this time with full details and explanations. The book, still bearing the same title, The Future I Saw, was now no longer just a compilation of brief dreams, but had transformed into a comprehensive document of what she had witnessed, what she had written down, and what she had carried with her throughout the years. And in this return, Tatsuki revealed a few things about herself. She was born on December 2nd, 1954, in Kanagawa Prefecture, and now lives in the port city of Yokohama. Her childhood was unremarkable, much like that of millions of other Japanese children in the post-war era. She loved painting, enjoyed singing, was dreamy and sensitive. But there was one thing that very few others had. Beginning at the age of 9, she started to see dreams that were unlike those of ordinary people. In these dreams, there was an old man with silver white hair, gentle eyes, and a slow, calm voice. He would often appear beside her and tell her about things that had not yet come to pass. They would talk in dreams, walking together under the moonlight, and the old man would whisper of things she would only come to understand many years later. The first dream that truly unsettled her came in the year 1976. It was a November night when Tatsuki dreamt of a man singing beneath the bright glow of stage lights, only to suddenly collapse under that blurred and fading light. The crowd below gasped in shock, and she knew immediately who the man was. It was Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of the band Queen. In 1976, Freddie Mercury was at the peak of his career, his health vibrant, his voice echoing through stadiums across the world. To say he would die would have been no different than inviting ridicule from the public, but instead of brushing it off, Tatsuki quietly sketched the dream and carefully recorded it in her journal. 15 years later, on November 24, 1991, the world was shaken by the news. Freddie Mercury had passed away. Television broadcasts aired special reports. Newspapers printed his image on their front pages. And when Tatsuki opened her old journal, she could hardly believe what she saw. It was the first time she felt afraid of herself, afraid that dreams were no longer just dreams. And when she turned on the TV, what sent a deeper chill down her spine was not the news of Freddie's death itself, but a piece of documentary footage, showing fans preparing to make a biographical film in his memory. In her 1976 journal, there had been a small frame, a simple drawing of a film crew shooting a scene about a deceased artist. The resemblance was disturbingly precise. Tatsuki tried to convince herself that it was all just an uncanny coincidence. But deep down, she knew. Coincidences that perfect are rarely accidental. From that point on, her dreams began to arrive more regularly, and they started to come true according to a strange pattern of time. Some would unfold 5 years later, some 10, and some exactly 15 years from the moment they were seen. She began documenting everything, leaving no detail behind: the setting, the sounds, the colors, the names, the time, and even the emotional sensations that accompanied them. Another dream occurred on August 31st, 1992. She saw herself walking down a long corridor with light pouring in through towering windows. At the end of the corridor hung a painting of a blonde woman holding a child. The word Dana was written across the canvas. And in the very next moment, there was a blinding light, the sound of metal crashing, and the cries of many people. 5 years later, on August 31st, 1997, the world was once again stunned. Princess Diana had died in a car crash in Paris. And once again, Tatsuki's journal had recorded the moment years earlier, captured in simple sketches so vivid they were haunting. From 1995 onward, the prophetic dreams became more frequent, and they began to touch on matters of far greater scale: natural disasters, earthquakes, tsunamis, and geological upheavals beyond the control of humankind. And it was because of this growing urgency that she began to draw the book that the world would one day search for again: The Future I Saw. On a winter night in 1995, Tatsuki dreamed of the old man with silver hair once again. In the dream, he led her to a strange land where the ground had split open, and the air was thick with the choking scent of stone dust. Tatsuki awoke in the middle of the night with an uncanny sense of foreboding. The next morning, she opened her journal and carefully recorded the date of the dream: January 2nd, 1995. She then sketched the scene of a devastated landscape, and beneath it wrote a single line of note: something will rupture in 15 days. And exactly 15 days later, on January 17, 1995, the Great Hanshin earthquake, also known as the Kobe earthquake, struck. Nearly 6,500 lives were lost. Tens of thousands of homes collapsed, and Japan, a country built on order and resilience, was left frighteningly exposed to the sheer force of nature. In that moment, Tatsuki no longer doubted. She could no longer convince herself that what she was seeing was mere coincidence. She believed with certainty that the future was sending her signals. With the conviction that these warnings were not meant to remain locked away within the pages of a private journal, Tatsuki began compiling the dreams she had documented over many years. And then, she officially published the manga titled The Future I Saw. But what left many people puzzled was this. Immediately after the book's release in 1999, Tatsuki disappeared once again. And perhaps the story would have ended there, had it not been for one more dream. A dream so vivid, so urgent, that it compelled her to break more than 2 decades of silence. On a July night in 2021, Tatsuki awoke with a start. Her breathing was rapid. Cold sweat clung to her forehead. She had dreamed of standing alone in a vast field of water, beneath a sky the color of ash, where no sunlight shone. The sea south of Japan began to bubble. Then, from the depths of the ocean, 2 enormous dragons emerged, twisting and writhing as though they were tearing at the Earth's crust. Then came the sound of an explosion, and then silence as the land was swallowed whole. She realized that this dream was the continuation of an older vision from 1999, but this time it was far clearer and far more violent. The repetition was impossible to ignore. She could not remain silent any longer. And so, in 2023, Tatsuki re-released her book in a more complete edition, one that included new dreams, and most importantly, a warning. A warning about a looming catastrophe that had not yet come, but was drawing ever closer. In that dream, she stood at an immense height, so high that she could see the entire expanse of the sea south of Japan spread out beneath her like a living 3-dimensional map. At first, the ocean was unnervingly calm, but within moments, massive pockets of air began to rise from the ocean floor, bubbling up like enormous cauldrons churning beneath the Earth's crust. It was the unmistakable sign of an underwater volcano on the verge of erupting. But what she could never forget, what had seared itself into her memory, was the emergence of 2 enormous dragons. They twisted beneath the water's surface, gradually forming into shape from the edges of the scene. They moved silently, coiling around the center of the rising bubbles, as if guarding something hidden beneath. And then, in an instant, a massive column of water burst from the sea, tearing through the sky and unleashing a tsunami beyond anything the human mind could imagine. Tatsuki stood frozen, unable to move, as the waves, 3 times taller than those of the 2011 disaster, came crashing toward the shore, dragging with them clouds of dust, vehicles, buildings, and millions of people. She could not remember how she breathed during that dream. All she knew was that after the wave, a new land began to rise. It surfaced slowly from the water like an ancient being waking from a slumber that had lasted for thousands of years. Wet soil churned upward, stone heaving into jagged forms, rugged, raw, and untouched. And in that moment, Tatsuki knew with certainty that this new land would connect Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Philippines into one continuous landmass. In chaos, most people think only of endings. But in Tatsuki's dream, the end carried with it a beginning. A new chapter, one that humanity neither expected nor prepared for, yet could not refuse. And what made the dream all the more chilling was this. Tatsuki had seen the exact date it would happen. It was written clearly, 5 a.m. July 5th, 2025. Perhaps she understood that many would doubt her, that some would laugh, dismissing it as superstition. But she also knew this. If among the millions who read these words, only a small number believed and prepared, then if the dream were ever to come true, the loss might not be as great. To some, Tatsuki's dream was nothing more than an expression of excessive anxiety. But to those who had followed her chain of predictions since the 1970s, they understood one thing clearly. What Tatsuki saw in her dreams should not be dismissed lightly. And so, the biggest question following the reissue of her book, especially with its stark warning about a new continent in 2025, was this: could such a thing actually happen? The answer, to many people's surprise, is yes. While the probability is low, it remains entirely possible, at least in theory. Japan lies within a geological region known as the Pacific Ring of Fire, a place where multiple tectonic plates of the Earth's crust converge, and also the area with the highest density of underwater volcanoes in the world. These tectonic plates are not stationary. They shift, inch by inch, year by year. They generate earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and, on occasion, they give birth to new land. In 2013, just 500 meters off the coast of Japan's Nishinoshima Island, an underwater volcano quietly erupted, creating a small island that had never appeared on any map. Within just a few months, its area expanded rapidly, eventually merging with the main island and doubling Nishinoshima's overall size. Another case occurred in 2021 in the Kuril Islands, a contested region between Japan and Russia. There, an underwater volcano suddenly erupted without any prior warning. When meteorological experts arrived by helicopter to inspect the site, they discovered that a new island had formed. These events, though modest in scale, served as proof that what Tatsuki described in her visions was not entirely implausible. And so, we return to her dream from 2021, the one in which Tatsuki saw two enormous dragons twisting beneath the sea. If we set aside the symbolic imagery for a moment, many researchers have pointed out a curious detail. The position of the two dragons in Tatsuki's drawings closely matches the location of two major tectonic plates beneath the Pacific Ocean, the Philippine Sea Plate and the Pacific Plate. It is precisely at the intersection of these two plates that the likelihood of underwater volcanic eruption is highest. And if the conditions were just right, such an eruption could indeed push the seafloor upward, forming entirely new stretches of land. If there is one dream in life that leaves Tatsuki waking up gasping for breath, not out of terror, but because the sense of loss in that very dream feels all too real, then it is the dream she experienced in the late 1990s. She wrote about it in her journal, but only many years later did she confess that she had never been entirely ready to reveal that dream to the world, not because she feared disbelief, but because she was terrified that people would be utterly powerless to act upon it. In that dream, a resounding sound erupted from deep within the earth, so powerful that she felt her spine shudder, even in sleep. It was a sound reminiscent of an ancient roar, as if the very crust of the earth were cracking open somewhere. She awoke within the dream. The clock before her read exactly 5 o'clock, yet there was no way to tell whether it was 5 in the morning or in the afternoon. Tatsuki stepped out of her home only to find that everything was no longer intact. The roads were shattered. Tall buildings had their lower floors torn apart, as though an invisible hand had yanked whole blocks of concrete from the earth. Cars lay askew, canopies collapsed, and power lines flickered like the remnants of a city that once thrived. She beheld a grand bridge spanning a river, yet its latter half was gone. Around her, there was no one. The street before her was desolate. And when Tatsuki looked down, she realized that she was no longer standing on solid ground. Before her and behind her stretched nothing but water. Then, in the very instant she awoke, she felt as though everything had come to an end. When reissuing The Future I Saw, Tatsuki appended a note beneath this dream. I am not sure whether this scene is that of the 2011 earthquake or not, for what I witnessed was far more horrifying. And I was still wearing a short-sleeved shirt, even though March in Japan is still bitterly cold. That very detail, her wearing a short-sleeved shirt, sent shivers down many spines. For the 2011 tsunami occurred during winter, yet Tatsuki's dream bore the elements of summer. And in 2025, what she dreamt indeed unfolded during the summer season. You may not believe in dreams. You may even think that the future is something no one can ever truly reach in advance. But if there was anything in this story that made you pause, even for just a moment, to think, then feel free to share your thoughts below. I'm always open to reading them and to going deeper with you into the things that have yet to be fully understood. And if you'd like to continue exploring stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I'll see you again in the next video.